the rear Dana 35. So first thing we want to do is we're going to want to block up the vehicle, put it on some stands, get your tires off of there, and then we have to remove the rear drive shaft here. So just got a socket 8mm to remove the caps on there. Then you'll push the drive shaft this way to get it out of the yoke, and then you'll pull it out of the transfer case with the spline sleeve there. And then what we have to do is we've got to prep our sides here. So we'll be removing our caliper, and that'll be these two bolts here with the 13mm. So you remove that, get that out of the way, and then you'll be able to get your rotor off. Once you get the rotor off, you got access to your axle here, and then we have to go underneath, and you'll have a catch pan. You'll remove all the bolts for your cover, leave the top one loose, and then get a wedge or a screwdriver or something and pry it from the bottom. Open that up and drain your fluid out, because we have to get inside there to get the locking pin out of the spider gears so that we can remove our axles. And I'm going to end up putting a plug in this so we can drain the fluid in the future. Remove this locking pin so that your axles will slide this way, so you can remove the C-clips that hold the axles in. So you just get yourself a combo wrench. This one ends up being a quarter, and you're going to turn that out of there to remove your locking pin. Out that locking pin, you can move the axle inward to remove the C-clip on each one, and now you can pull the axle out the end. You're going to have access to your carrier, and you're going to want to remove your bearing caps off of either side here. Before you do that, you should punch mark one side so you don't get them mixed up. So I just use a punch, and I mark 3 on this side and again on the cap. So so I don't mix up my bearing caps. Now it'll probably be tight coming out, so a trick I like to use to pull it out is I just hook up a ratchet strap onto the receiver here, and then I just wrap the strap around the carrier and back again to the receiver here, and then just tighten it up, and that'll help pull that out of there. And then you catch it as it's coming out, catch that and remove it. Side here, we're gonna have to remove the pinion. So you just get in there with the impact, and you'll drive the nut off of there. That should be 1 1/8 inch. That's what it is on mine. And once you've driven the pinion off, hopefully the pinion will slide off by hand, and then you use like a aluminum drift or brass or hardwood or something, and then you're gonna drive the pinion this way, and then you want to catch it on the other side and remove it off of the other side. Your drift, and you want to get in there and you want to remove that that cup for the bearing race on the back side, just to see if there's any shims in behind it. This one shouldn't have any shims. You shouldn't have to remove it, but if you want to, you can remove that one too, just to check. Bearing race out of this side that fits in there, and there were no shims in behind.
so we can put that back in. I like to use the old bearings for pre-assembly.
This is that cup that we had removed. Goes with this bearing here. We left that other cup in the housing. This is our crush sleeve, and then you'll have to remove the oil seal to get this bearing out, and then we've got our yoke and our nut. We're gonna be putting this back in to check our wear pattern, so I would like to have this slip on and off by hand, and I like to grind out the bearings, grind out the inner bore so that they're slip fit on the pinion. I don't use the crush sleeve for the pre-assembly process while I'm trying to set my wear pattern. Also too, with the old nut, I'd like to make this go on and off by hand as well, so it just helps with the pre-assembly procedure. This side of the rear, the Dana 35. On the front, the Dana 30, we had shims that went in behind these bearings here. In this case, there's shims on the outside. These shims, these plates here, you want to keep track of that when you remove it. Keep track of what side these went on, and they're obviously way thicker, and they'll be pounded in. Once you get the carrier in, you'll pound in your shims after the fact. This is also what makes it so tight to come out, because it's creating preload and an interference fit on these bearings. So in this case, we don't have any shims in between the bearing and the carrier. So I just wanted to show you here. If you notice that the bearing is actually lower than the carrier face, you're gonna need a little jig that has a little step in it, whereas or you have one that's got the right diameter, where it's pressing the inner bore of the bearing on deeper than the carrier there. So it's got to seat that bearing down to the bottom of the carrier. Now when you get your race and you put your race on there, you take a look, it's almost level with the carrier. There's a little bit of space there. I don't know if you can see that. So with the cup on there, that actually brings it out past the carrier. So then that's where the ring comes in, because the ring is contacting the cup, and that is putting the preload on the bearing. So this design does not have any shims in between the carrier and the bearing, so we don't need to remove these bearings. This is the old gear set. This is my new gear set with the new carrier. This is a limited slip posi traction carrier that I'm putting in there. It has some clutches on both sides, and that is why they call it limited slip. The clutches will limit the slip. So sometimes the gears aren't marked on the side of the ring gear, sometimes they are, and they'll tell you what the gear ratio is. These don't, and if that happens, so then you mark the gears and you count them out on the ring and the pinion, and then you're going to divide the larger number by the smaller number, and that's going to give you your ratio. And in this case here, it ends up being, I believe, 39 divided by 11, which is going to give us a 355 ratio. And this is the factory gearing out of the Jeep. This one here, the new gear set, we mark it out, and it ended up being 43 on the ring gear and 14 on the pinion, which gives us a 307:1 ratio. A point to note is that the front Dana also had a 355 ratio. This has a 355 ratio. The new gear set in the front ended up being a 308 ratio, and this one in the back is a 307 ratio. I'm told that the reason for the difference is that you're actually supposed to have something like a 1% or a 1 to 4% difference in the gear ratios from front to back.